They shoved her into a pool and laughed, because she was too plain, too quiet, too out of place. But what no one knew was, she'd been waiting for that moment. 5 years ago, they nearly drowned her in cruelty. Today they handed her the evidence. This isn't just a story about humiliation or revenge. It's about a woman who taught herself to swim, not to survive, but to strike. And when the elite mocked her again at their marble palace, her silence didn't save her. It destroyed them. The magnolias were in bloom again. Petals drifted through the July air, like polite little secrets catching the golden light as they landed along the cobblestone path of Ashbourne Hall, home of the Crane dynasty. The estate was a cathedral of old money, limestone walls, stained glass verandas, and rose gardens trimmed by silence and superiority. But today something new rustled beneath the magnolia trees. Sarah Dwyer stood near the edge of it all, by a fountain carved with Greek gods no one could name. Her dress cream linen, modest in cut, $30 from a local boutique hugged her frame gently. She wasn't the loudest, the shiniest, or the most photographed woman in the courtyard, but her green eyes watched everything those eyes had once drowned. A string quartet played near the marble pool, where Virginia's elite had gathered hedge fund titans, sipping lavender cocktails, socialites in $1, $200 swimsuits, laughing with polished teeth. Servers glided by with flutes of champagne and canapes that looked too elegant to eat. The entire event was designed to dazzle. But today Sarah wasn't here to be dazzled. She had been here before. Not at Ashbourne specifically, but in rooms just like it where whispered judgment clung to napkins and cruelty passed as charm. She'd once worn the wrong thing to the wrong party and paid for it with breathless panic and chlorine in her lungs. Back then she hadn't known how to swim. Back then Genevieve Crane had smiled with her teeth and shoved her into a pool while her friends roared with laughter. The humiliation had clung like a second skin, worse than water, colder than chlorine. Sarah remembered the burn in her lungs, the silence underwater, the blur of a world too cruel and too polished to care. But that was 5 years ago, and now she stood on the same kind of marble, surrounded by the same kind of people. Except today she wore a ring from Logan Maddox, the billionaire no one believed she could deserve, defense mogul, founder of Maddox Defense Systems, a man whose empire guarded nations but chose to love her. The whispers had already started. Is that her? The one who flailed at the college pool party? That dress did she sew it herself? She must have hacked her way into Logan's life. Sarah heard it all and said nothing. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was a memory. It was math. It was a code. Pre-written, a program launched months ago with one objective: exposure through cruelty. The more they mocked her, the closer they came to stepping into the trap. Across the lawn, Genevieve Crane laughed, tossing her emerald-tinted hair back like a movie star. She didn't know the net had already been cast, that her worst impulse would soon become her public undoing. Sarah's gaze flicked to Logan, tall, steady by the veranda. He nodded once, and beneath her quiet smile, the storm began to turn. It began with a smirk. Genevieve Crane had always been fluent in venom, disguised as charm. Her emerald bikini glittered in the sunlight, her diamond anklet swinging like a blade at her ankle. Surrounded by a circle of socialites, her voice rang louder than the quartet's violins. Every tilt of her head, every glance towards Sarah, was a loaded gun wrapped in satin. "So, that's Logan's wife," she said slowly, as though tasting something bitter. The socialites followed her gaze. Their designer sunglasses shifted in unison, their lips already curling with inherited arrogance. Brielle Monroe, fashion darling and Vogue ambassador, let out a low chuckle. That dress, Brielle whispered to no one in particular. "I've seen better fabric-lining dog carriers." Laughter fluttered through the group like confetti, sharp and sweet. Others joined in, Vivian St. James. Descendant of old Virginia, Money narrowed her eyes from behind a parasol. She looks like she wandered in from the kitchen staff entrance. More laughter, more teeth. Sarah didn't flinch. She stood near the pool's edge, cream sundress, brushing her knees like an apparition. No one expected, but everyone suddenly remembered. Her green eyes scanned the marble columns and crystal bowls, registering every detail. The angles, the players, the echoes of past insults. Behind her calm, her mind recalled the countless hours in the Davenport Civic Pool where she'd taught herself how not to drown. Each stroke is a memory. Each breath is a refusal to die quietly. Genevieve stepped forward, her voice syrupy. Sarah, darling, remember that party at Crest Lake University? When what was it? Nearly drowned in front of the debate team. Gasps, chuckles. One man choked on his Prosecco. A hedge fund manager named Graham Holt. Gold Rolex. Gleaming leaned into the cruelty. Wasn't she the one who had to be dragged out like a wet paper towel? Sarah met his eyes, said nothing. Her silence unsettled him, but Genevieve wasn't finished. And now here she is, she drawled, gesturing around her, the new lady of Ashbourne, in a dress that looks like it was picked up at a garage sale. Maybe Logan married the wrong file. Another round of laughter. This time louder. Less restrained, the marble courtyard echoed with mockery. But Sarah stood still, not even a flicker of reaction. No defensive glance, no biting retort. Just those green eyes holding the weight of a storm and the precision of a countdown clock. Genevieve's smirk tightened. Somewhere beneath the performance, something in her sensed it. Sarah wasn't the same girl she once was. She was something else now. Something quiet and far more dangerous. From the library terrace, a group of academics invited for status. Not conversation began to chime in. One of them, Dr. Margot Ellison, sociology chair at Camden. Ivy adjusted her silk scarf. I was told she came from community college, she said, sipping her drink. Unrefined intellect, but impressive survival instincts, apparently. The crowd chuckled. Sarah blinked slowly. If only they knew how close they were to sinking. The heat shimmered above the stone. The sun was blinding, almost theatrical spotlighting. The stage where the wicked had gathered to jeer. Sarah felt its warmth against her skin, but her pulse remained cool. Measured, she'd waited for this day, planned for it down to the second. And now, the first crack had formed in the mirror-perfect world of Ashbourne Hall. Genevieve Crane strutted toward her hips, swaying with practiced elegance, the diamond anklet chiming like a countdown bell. I still remember it, she said. Her voice low for Sarah only. The way you flailed, like a kitten tossed into a lake. Pathetic, behind her laughter surged again, giddy, vicious. It fed on itself, like fire-consuming lace. Sarah took one small step back. The edge of the pool kissed her heels. Genevieve grinned, teeth white, malice radiant. What's the matter? Still can't swim. Sarah. Her voice rose loud enough for the crowd. You're not going to embarrass us again, are you? The taunt echoed over marble. Heads turned, phones lifted. Even the waitstaff paused to listen. Sarah's silence held. She didn't blink. That terrified Genevieve more than any comeback ever could. From a distance, Logan Maddox stood by the trellis, his suit immaculate, his hands still, his steel-gray eyes locked onto Sarah's. She gave him the smallest of nods, a signal buried in 1,000 hours of shared strategy. It was time. Genevieve's expression faltered just for a breath. Then, as if to reclaim her dominance, she pushed. Hard Sarah's feet lifted from the stone, her body tilted back. For a brief second, the world slowed, and then splash. The water swallowed her. Gasps replaced laughter. A flute shattered on tile. Someone swore. Another choked on a hors d'oeuvre. But Logan moved. He was already walking. Sarah sank beneath the surface limbs. Still no struggle, no bubbles, just white fabric drifting like silk beneath the turquoise calm. Near the magnolia trees, a medic dropped their champagne and sprinted toward the pool. Guests stared frozen. Murmurs cracked through the air like hail. She's not moving. Is this real? Someone do something. Logan's voice cut through the noise like a scalpel. You pushed someone who nearly drowned once, he said. Now standing at the pool's edge, his voice cold, deliberate. And you just admitted loudly that you did it on purpose. Genevieve blinked. She can swim, she stammered. She's fine. It's a joke. Really? Logan stepped closer. Because that sounds a lot like attempted murder. Gasps, silence, stares. Then Logan dove. His tailored suit sliced through the water, heavy but sure. Within seconds he surfaced with Sarah in his arms, still pale eyes closed. The medics swarmed. Someone screamed. Others backed away. The string quartet stopped playing, and just like that, the laughter died. The medics worked quickly, oxygen mask, vitals check, defibrillator within reach. One of them, a woman with a no-nonsense bun and combat medic tattoos, looked up and said loudly, "She has no pulse." The words dropped like an anchor into the courtyard. No one sipped their champagne now. Genevieve Crane paled. Her perfect tan couldn't mask the cold draining from her face. She's faking, she whispered, then louder, grasping for allies. She knows how to swim. Everyone knows it, but her voice cracked at the edges. The crowd had shifted. This wasn't fun anymore. This wasn't snide comments and silk-draped laughter. This was a headline. This was legal. This was real. And Genevieve had just confessed on speaker. Logan stood over Sarah, dripping wet, his suit clinging to his frame like armor. He brushed a wet strand of hair from her face. There was no panic in him, only precision, the same kind that had made his company a $10 billion fortress. "She's not breathing," the medic confirmed again loudly. And still, Logan didn't flinch. "She trained for this," he murmured under his breath. "She's not broken. She's bait." Behind him, several guests were already backing away from Genevieve, their expressions changing from delight to horror. Some had phones out filming, others whispered frantically. Every camera now pointed to the woman who laughed first. Genevieve's smirk had vanished. She opened her mouth, but no one was listening. And then Sarah's eyes fluttered open. Slow, controlled. She blinked up at the sky, then turned her head gently toward Logan. Her lips didn't move, but he caught the message in her gaze. Now Logan rose, turning to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice no longer cold but lethal. "What just happened here wasn't an accident. It was an ambush, and not by us." He motioned. Security moved in, like shadows, suits, earpieces, tablets in hand. A woman stepped forward holding a file. Inside photos, documents, printouts of emails. The entire operation had been building for months. Genevieve had been played, and everyone who had laughed sneered, whispered behind napkin-covered mouths. They were on record. Logan pointed toward the Rose Garden. Vivian St. James. Lang Holdings has just lost $15 million in defense infrastructure contracts as of this morning. He turned to the terrace. "Dr. Margot Ellison, your Ivy League university has forwarded your emails to Ms. Crane, encouraging academic exclusion based on low-born optics to the bar. Declan Royce, your lobbying firm, has been blacklisted from our Defense Advisory Board, effective immediately. To the poolside, Brielle Monroe Vogue has been notified of your involvement in a targeted harassment campaign. Your sponsorships will not survive the week. Every name was a hammer. Every revelation is a falling chandelier." And still, Sarah lay quietly on the stretcher, mask over her face, eyes half-lidded. The marble under her no longer felt cold. It felt like justice. They hadn't just humiliated her. They'd written the script for their own destruction. The courtyard was no longer a party. It was a tribunal. Gone was the laughter, the clink of crystal, the careless elegance. What remained was raw silence and the quiet rustle of panic. A sound that always arrives when the powerful realize they've made a fatal mistake in front of witnesses. Logan Maddox stood beside the stretcher, drenched, radiating something colder than water, unforgiving purpose. He didn't need to raise his voice. Every syllable was a scalpel. "Each of you who mocked my wife," he said, "scanning the stunned faces, has built your reputation on cruelty masked as culture. You believed her silence was submission. You thought discretion was weakness." He paused, then added, "You were wrong." A wave of movement behind him. His legal team, they began calling names. Vivian St. James, one attorney announced, "Your family's estate portfolio is now disqualified from the Department of Defense renewal contracts. $22 million in projected earnings terminated." Vivian gasped, her pearl necklace catching in her throat. Her husband pulled out his phone and stumbled toward the fountain. "Graham Holt," another voice echoed. "Your hedge fund's cybersecurity deal with Maddox. Systems has been severed. You'll receive a final invoice for breach of ethical conduct." His Rolex suddenly felt like a shackle. His smirk melted. "Dr. Margot Ellison." Logan continued, stepping toward the academic circle. "Your university has been issued formal evidence of your role in an internal defamation scheme. Your tenure review board meets on Monday." Dr. Ellison's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered at her feet. Her colleague Felix took an unintentional step back, as though fearing the fallout might be contagious. The air turned electric. People began whispering, not about Sarah now, but about themselves. What emails had they sent? What jokes had they laughed at? What whispers had been recorded? And who else had seen? Julian Frost's charity board chair looked visibly pale as one of Logan's assistants approached with a sealed envelope. "Your contracts for the Hope Gala are hereby revoked," she said, her tone emotionless. "Inclusion in our philanthropic network is no longer viable." "But this was just—" "We were joking." Julian stammered. "Exactly," Logan replied. "You joked about a woman's worth, her origin, her survival, in public, on record, and you did it thinking there would be no consequence. That era ended today." A hush fell again. Guests shifted. Some slipped away toward their luxury cars. Others stood frozen. The ones who'd laughed loudest now looked for shadows to hide in. And at the center of it all, Sarah Dwyer, still reclining on the stretcher, removed her oxygen mask. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the marble like thunder. "I didn't come here for your approval," she said, eyes steady. "I came here for your exposure." The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't need to. They knew the game was no longer theirs to play. The ash-white stone of Ashbourne Hall had never seemed so brittle. Eyes turned toward the library terrace, where the academic elite stood stiff as chess pieces. The air hung heavy with the scent of crushed magnolias and fear. Not the fear of violence, but of exposure, of secrets laid bare beneath the sun. Dr. Margot Ellison tried to maintain her composure. She smoothed her silk scarf the same way she did during faculty panels, but her fingers trembled. She knew what was coming. Logan faced her now, his voice smooth and surgical. "You advised Ms. Crane," he began, "that my wife Sarah Dwyer lacked the optics to join an Ivy League think tank. You stated on record that her community college background would dilute academic prestige." Gasps. A staff member handed Logan a tablet. He tapped it once. The speakers crackled. Then came the email, read aloud in Dr. Ellison's own voice. "While Ms. Dwyer's raw output in artificial intelligence is surprising, we must maintain standards of image. If we allow working-class representation into research halls, our grant partners may view it as ideological slippage." The audience stiffened. A low murmur rippled like an incoming tide. "Your university," Logan said, "has begun a formal ethics review. Your tenure is no longer secure." Dr. Ellison opened her mouth to object, but the sound never came. Her colleague Felix Harland, a prominent historian, stepped forward too quickly. "This is absurd," he said. "She was never qualified." "Her resume?" Was Logan cut him off with a raised brow. "Your involvement is also documented. You submitted edits to Sarah's Wikipedia page under a pseudonym, calling her a lab secretary with inflated credit." Another tablet flashed. Another voice recording. "She's a Cinderella with access to a billionaire's lab. If I had her funding, I'd have cured cancer." The shame hit harder than any lawsuit. From the far side of the terrace, a silver-haired trustee turned and walked away without a word. "Let me tell you something," Logan said now. Looking directly at Felix Sarah's AI framework saved our company $300 million in predictive logistics. Her neural net design outperformed 5 Ivy League prototypes. While you were crafting narratives, she was crafting futures. Sarah stood then. She walked steadily, no trace of weakness now, toward the academics who once denied her a seat at their table. Her voice was soft but clear. "You didn't reject me because I lacked merit. You rejected me because I lacked your accent, your address, your dinner club. That's not scholarship. That's cowardice in tweed." The crowd inhaled as one. No one laughed anymore. The scholars' podiums had become their pedestals of disgrace. And Sarah, the woman they once mocked as a misfit with second-hand shoes, now stood taller than them all. By now, Ashbourne Hall was no longer a gala. It was a reckoning with linen napkins and ruined reputations. The champagne tower near the Rose Garden glittered under the afternoon sun, but no one touched it. The chatter had thinned to a stunned quiet. The elite were learning one after another that even polished cruelty had a price. Logan turned next toward the fountain, where the philanthropic crowd had gathered just hours ago, preening for photographers. They wore compassion, like couture designer gowns and diamond watches masking ambition sharper than any blade. "Let's not forget," Logan said, "those who pride themselves on giving while simultaneously scheming to take everything from a woman who asks for nothing." Eleanor Crane, matriarch of the Crane dynasty and chair of multiple foundations, lifted her chin, but the steely pride in her eyes was cracking. Fast. A security aide handed Logan another document. He unfolded it with clinical calm. Emails between Eleanor Crane and Julian Frost, head of the Ashbourne Youth Trust, Logan continued detail-coordinated efforts to exclude Sarah from all charity board invitations on the grounds that she would, quote, tarnish the image of upward mobility. He read from the printout, "Let's not kid ourselves. No one wants a former lab worker on a donor list. It signals desperation. Her marriage reeks of transactional optics." Whispers exploded, faces turned. Julian stepped forward, color draining from his face. That was taken out of context. Logan finished for him. "Good. Let's provide some." He nodded. One of his assistants tapped a button on a nearby screen. Up flashed a side-by-side of Sarah's community reading center in Davenport, a modest storefront with hand-painted signs and a bank transfer log, showing Julian's charity had funneled donations into executive bonuses. Audible gasps. While Sarah was donating 40% of her startup royalties to fund children's literacy, Logan said, "Your charity sent checks to each other for six-figure Christmas bonuses." Eleanor's fingers clutched her brooch. Julian stumbled back. Then Sarah stepped forward, dress still damp at the hem, her voice like velvet over steel. "I never asked to join your circles," she said, looking directly at Eleanor. "But I had hoped you meant what you preached. That impact mattered more than invitations. That merit mattered more than a last name." Her green eyes scanned the crowd, so many who'd smiled while stabbing her. "Now I know better." From the media tent, a camera clicked. Live feeds were broadcasting everything. Viewers from around the country were already reacting. Online, the hashtags had shifted. Logan turned once more to Julian. "You'll be removed from every board affiliated with Maddox Systems, and your foundation's public filings have been submitted to state investigators." The fountain, once a centerpiece of prestige, now echoed with a single sound, the collapse of a false reputation. Near the buffet, the air thickened, not with aroma, but with unease. The estate staff had once floated through Ashbourne, like ghosts in tailored white, silent, invisible watching. But Sarah had always noticed them. She had been one of them once. That's why their betrayal had cut deeper than the aristocrats' jeers. It was Jasper Reed, the head server, who broke the silence with cruelty hours earlier, and now it was Jasper who stood frozen as Logan's security team approached. "You mocked my wife," Logan said, walking slowly across the polished stone. His suit was half dry now, clinging in shadows. "You said she didn't belong here, that she was the help." Jasper's voice was barely audible. It was just a joke, a private moment. Logan's brow arched. Nothing is private at an event with 62 security cameras. He raised a hand. One of his aides tapped a tablet. The buffet screen lit up with audio recordings from the kitchen comms. Jasper laughing. "Look at her. Standing there like she owns the place, that sundress. She probably borrowed it from the maid's closet. Laia Brooks' caterer. She's got those eyes like she's someone. But she'll always be cleaning lab glassware in my mind." The room recoiled. Champagne glasses were set down without a sip. Logan's voice was low, controlled. "You laugh because she didn't scream, because she didn't fight back, because she didn't correct you. But let me tell you what." Her silence bought. He snapped his fingers. A lawyer stepped forward with 2 envelopes. "Cease and desist. Formal complaints. Your employment at Ashbourne Hall is terminated, effective immediately. Your professional references revoked." Jasper blinked. Laia dropped her tray. The crash echoed through the courtyard like a verdict. Sarah approached them, not with anger, but with eyes of quiet reckoning. "I never asked you to respect me," she said softly. "I only hoped you'd remember where I came from. That silence doesn't mean shame." Neither spoke, their expressions twisted from defiance to something close to regret, but it was too late. By the floral arch near the event planner's station, another ripple began. Clara Dunn, the lead coordinator, turned pale as Logan approached. "You called my wife a glitch," he said slowly. "You joked she was a clerical error, but here's the truth." He held up a printed screenshot, a message from Clara to Genevieve. "Seriously, Sarah Dwyer. The glitch in the guest list. Thought we fixed that?" The crowd sucked in a breath. Even the florist turned away. Sarah looked at Clara, voice steady. "Your mistake wasn't calling me a glitch. It was forgetting that even code, when written right, can crash entire systems." Logan's team handed Claire and her assistant their final papers. Event contracts, canceled, agency license, suspended. And just like that, the people who once curated elite moments were watching their own careers unravel petal by petal beneath the falling magnolias. The hospital room was bathed in muted gold from the setting sun. Machines blinked softly. A vase of magnolias brought by someone who understood the symbolism stood on the bedside table. Sarah Dwyer opened her eyes slowly. Her green gaze, still calm, met the steel-gray stare of Logan Maddox, who sat beside her, hand in hers. His suit had finally dried, but his jaw was still set. His mind miles away back at Ashbourne, at the moment she'd hit the water, at the crowd's horror, at Genevieve's unraveling smirk. "I used to think I had to protect you," he murmured. "But today, you showed me how to stand still while the world burns." Sarah smiled faintly. "I didn't want their apologies, Logan." He looked at her questioning. "I wanted their consequences." Ashbourne's gates had been shut, its invitations revoked, its marble now, cold with memory. And across the internet, something new bloomed, respect for the quiet woman in the cream dress. A woman who had taught herself to swim, not to float, but to wait, to circle, to strike. Their Georgetown townhouse, quiet and cluttered with lab notebooks and coffee-stained sketches. Sarah had stood barefoot, her eyes fierce. "If they try again, I won't flinch." She'd said Logan hadn't doubted her. So they'd hired private investigators, planted audio recorders, embedded legal observers into the guest list, synchronized every step from the medic's placement to the contract suspensions. And yes, they'd practiced the moment she'd fall. "I'm not pretending to be helpless," she had whispered back then. "I'm just waiting for their cruelty to prove itself again." At Ashbourne, Genevieve, Crane was denied bail. Her family's real estate empire began to collapse as major partnerships dissolved overnight. Her image, once painted on billboards and bridal magazines, was now scraped from society pages. Her cousin Thatcher Crane, caught laundering donations for political gain, faced federal scrutiny. Judge Alistair Crane, who once sneered at Sarah's presence, now faced ethics hearings for suppressing evidence of nepotism. From fashion to finance to philanthropy, the dominoes fell. And in their place, Sarah's name, not shouted, not forced, but whispered like something sacred. A $2 billion fund was announced in her name, the Dwyer Initiative for Underrepresented Innovators, backed by Maddox Systems and fueled by Sarah's original concept, born in a Pittsburgh notebook, scrawled between double shifts. Logan spoke at the press conference. "No podium, no teleprompter. My wife didn't marry up," he said simply. "She built forward, and I'm honored to follow." At the hospital, Sarah sat up slowly. A nurse brought her tea. She sipped, then asked, "Has anyone checked on the bookstore?" Logan blinked. "Your bookstore." She nodded. "The kids' reading corner needs new shelves." And just like that, between billion-dollar takedowns and international headlines, Sarah Dwyer reminded the world who she truly was. Not a socialite, not a spectacle, not even a survivor, but a builder. A queen with ink-stained hands and a mind sharp enough to rewrite empires. The chandeliers of Ashbourne Hall no longer flickered for the elite. They flickered for the reckoning. By Monday morning, subpoenas had been served like hors d'oeuvres. The Crane dynasty, once untouchable, now sat beneath the full weight of financial audits, public disgrace, and federal investigations. Every whisper that once conspired against Sarah Dwyer had become a breadcrumb leading directly to her downfall. Genevieve Crane, once the jewel of high society, now sat behind tempered glass in a county jail conference room. Her emerald bikini had become an orange jumpsuit. Her diamond anklet was gone, her name a whisper of scandal on every news cycle. And the video footage was damning. The moment she pushed Sarah, the moment she smirked, the moment the crowd laughed, all preserved, all public. Logan stood beside a panel of anchors. His demeanor was calm, his words measured. "This wasn't just about my wife," he said. "It was about what we tolerate in silence, what we excuse with money, and how far we let cruelty masquerade as culture." He then held up a copy of Sarah's lab notes, the original AI architecture that now powered Maddox Systems' most efficient defense module. "She's not my shadow," he said, voice steady. "She's my compass." Meanwhile, across the country, Declan Royce's lobbying firm was blacklisted from Washington advisory councils. Vivienne Saint. James's estate contracts were dissolved. Her ancestral wealth was left in limbo. Dr. Margot Ellison was stripped of tenure. Her final lecture was canceled. Brielle Monroe lost all fashion endorsements. Her social media accounts flooded with apologies to Sarah. Julian Frost's gala empire crumbled. Donors pulled out, events canceled, and the Dwyer bookstore in Davenport. It received a $500,000 donation overnight. Not from Logan, but from thousands of strangers who read her story, watched her rise, and saw themselves in her journey. Children lined up outside, volunteers painted the walls, local newspapers called it the heart of the town, and in its window sat a simple sign. Every story starts with a quiet sentence, Sarah Dwyer. The room was quiet. Logan sat beside Sarah again, both of them reading quietly. His hand rested over hers. "They called you a glitch," he said softly. She looked up, her green eyes bright. And they were right, she smiled. Glitches crash systems. He kissed her forehead, eyes shining. You didn't crash theirs. You rewrote it. The grand estate, once a palace of whispers and condescension, was now just property. Marble columns now echoed with absence. The auction house took bids, and as the magnolia trees swayed in a forgiving breeze, an anonymous bidder bought the ballroom where it all began. The plans, a scholarship fund center. For working-class students in tech, arts, and science, it would be named the Gray Mouse Foundation. Sarah and Logan walked hand in hand by the Davenport Civic Pool. The water is calm, reflective. She slipped off her sandals, stepped to the edge, closed her eyes, and dove in. No gasps, no panic, only strokes, powerful, clean, full of purpose. When she surfaced, Logan was waiting. "You were never drowning," he whispered. She smiled. "I was hunting." They called her invisible. They laughed when she fell, but she didn't fall. She waited, she watched, she planned, and when she rose, she didn't ask for justice. She became it. Because silence isn't surrender, it's a strategy, and her crown was never made of gold. It was made of grace, grit, and a memory that never forgot the sound of laughter while she sank. What happened at Ashbourne Hall wasn't just poetic justice, it was structural collapse. A system built on wealth exclusion and whispered cruelty was dismantled by one woman's silence and one man's unwavering loyalty. Sarah Dwyer didn't fight with rage. She fought with evidence, with strategy, with dignity. And in doing so, she became a symbol for every underestimated voice that's ever been laughed out of a room. As social psychologist Dr. Lena Amsel puts it, what makes this case extraordinary is not the revenge, it's the restraint. Sarah Dwyer proved that silence isn't submission, it's preparation. And when it's time, truth doesn't knock, it kicks the door open. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you reconsider what true power looks like, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more stories of quiet strength, justice, and transformation to light. This is Soul Stirring Stories, where the underdogs don't just rise, they reign.